Hello everyone, and welcome to part 1 of 5 of your Introduction to Legal Research. So you need to find something. This module will focus primarily on the resources available directly on our library website, but will also cover a couple of other resources too. By the end of this module, you will be comfortable using our LibGuides, our Catalogue, and the CAIJ's TOPO tool. You will also know when and when not to use Google. So you need to find something. Who are you going to call? For many of you, this is where you are used to starting, Google. Some of you might already be using Google Voice Assist to help with your research, hence the who you're going to call part. Now, I will never be the librarian who tells you not to Google. Google can be a great place to start your research if you know how to use it well, using features like an exact term search, limiting your results by domain, or proximity operators, that is, ensuring search terms are located near each other in the text. Compare this to this will help you ensure that your search results are that much more relevant. Some of you might also be used to using Google Scholar. Again, this is not bad if you use it properly. The same advanced search features work in Google Scholar and can make your results much stronger. You are also able to add the McGill library as your home library, giving you direct access from Google Scholar to items that we have in our holdings. To do this, click on the 3 parallel lines in the upper left corner. Select Settings, then Library Links, and search for the McGill library. Now, when you run a search, you can easily see what is available through the McGill library and access it directly. Note that this only works for articles and books indexed in our catalog, something I'll come back to in a minute. You will also note that there's a way to search case law in Google Scholar, but this is currently only for US law. But your best starting point for all your research really is the McGill Library homepage, and here's why. First, Google doesn't index everything, especially when it comes to law. There's a ton of content from within our databases that is just not visible to Google. I'm talking old case law, journal articles, full text books, and more. Google doesn't see it. Second, you're giving yourself a second step when you search Google to find resources, because after you search it, you still have to come back to the catalog to see if we have access to a particular resource. While that Google Scholar library feature I showed you is quite neat, it isn't comprehensive. Google doesn't know everything we have access to. For instance, one of the main databases we use for searching law journal articles is Hein Online, and that's only partially indexed, which means that Google Scholar only gives you that direct hyperlink to the McGill source a fraction of the time. The other times, you will have to manually go into Hein from the McGill library homepage in order for the proxy to kick in to find the article or book anyways. Third, our law subject guides are housed here. These tell you the best databases to use for a particular research question. Fourth, Google search features, even the advanced ones, are fairly rudimentary and are very generic. Our legal databases have tailored filters and unique search features and are designed to make legal research in particular easier. Similarly, our catalog's advanced search features make it easy to find exactly what you are looking for. So pause this recording, go to mcgill.ca/library, and bookmark this page. Now, for the purposes of this lesson, I will highlight two essential features of the library website. First, our law subject guides, and second, our catalog. In between these two resources, however, I will introduce you to another fantastic resource called TOPO, or Questions de Recherche from the CAIJ. So first up, we have our law subject guides, also called LibGuides. This is an extremely important resource that you should also bookmark forever. It is a curated list of e-resources specifically for law that tells you what database to use to do particular types of research. And last summer, I worked really hard to organize these for you so that you really had direction on which database to use. This is a particularly important resource because our catalog does not actually include journals or ebooks housed in many of these databases. So let's dig in. As I mentioned, you should use this to learn what resources to use to find journal articles in law, legislation, cases, and more. It should be your number one stop in your research process, unless you already know the best database to use for your question. When you click on the LibGuide, you can immediately see key resources on the right of the page. These will likely be your go-tos, but there are hundreds more resources to discover, which may be more pertinent for you to use depending on your research question. I'll note quickly here that the quick link to Westlaw Next is where you'll find your electronic site guide. Now let's try a scenario. Let's say that you're an RA for the dean, and he wants you to look up legislative debates from the 1960s surrounding the decriminalization of homosexuality in Canada. Where would you start looking? Step 1, we select the Law Subject Guide link from the homepage. We know we're looking at Canadian law, so we click there. Now we know we're looking at legislative research, but it is also historical. So we have two options, and both will get you to where you want to go. Let's say we take legislative research. There, you'll see the historical tab open up within legislative research. Select, and voila, a list of resources for historical legislative research. But here we know we are looking for debates, so you'll need to read the annotations to figure out which database includes the debates. Reading through, you essentially have two options: Canadian Parliamentary Historical Resources and LibGuide. So let's try another. Let's say you're doing some comparative civil law research and would like to consult German law resources. Where would you go? From the Law LibGuide, we know we are looking at foreign and comparative law, and not international law, because we want the law of a foreign jurisdiction, Germany, and not international laws such as UN treaties. From here, you can see that I've organized resources by jurisdiction, so we'll head down to Europe, and then select Germany. And you have a few resources there. Again, the goal here is to find the best resources to use to jumpstart your research. Evidently, there are a lot of jurisdictions that aren't included here, but we do have additional tools to help you. Foreign law research is a little beyond the scope of this lesson, but if you do have any questions, feel free to contact me directly. The next tool I want to show you is TOPO from the CAIJ. You can access this by going to the CAIJ website and selecting the Questions de Recherche button. TOPO is essentially an annotated bibliography, like our LibGuide, but instead of telling you the best databases to use when conducting research on a particular jurisdiction or for a general area of law, it tells you the best resources, legislation, doctrine, to consult on a sometimes narrow research question. For instance, let's say you want to learn the best resources to consult when conducting research on the division of powers in constitutional law. you would use the tree-like structure to find constitutional law, and look for a subheading that could encompass this type of question. Here, this was a general enough question that it was its own subheading. You could also use the search box to search for droit constitutionnel, partage des compétences. But if you didn't know that division of powers was translated as partage des compétences and not partage des pouvoirs, for instance, you wouldn't end up with useful results. Since you are all new to law, I recommend using the tree-like structure as much as possible. So we click into the subtopic, and the first result is a question that asks, what are the useful sources to consult on division of powers in constitutional law? Click in, and you are given key legislation, key treatises, down to the page and paragraph numbers to consult, and even a link out to a periodical index, which we'll talk more about in the 4th module. Some of the resources will be hyperlinked, making it easy for you to access, but others will only be available in print, though we might have electronic access via our catalog. So your next step now is to return to our catalog to try to find some of these titles. Before we move on to the catalog, just a quick recap of TOPO. Essentially, it's a great resource to help you jumpstart your research on a topic you know nothing about because it leads you directly to the best primary and secondary sources. It serves a different purpose than our LibGuides, which tells you the best databases to use depending on the type of research you're conducting. Now let's turn to our catalog. You'll recall from orientation that these are the things you can do from the catalog directly. Search for books, journals, videos, e-resources, and more. Request a hold, request an article scan, request an interlibrary loan, browse the shelf virtually, access e-resources directly, see holdings at other university libraries, and see the current availability of texts at 17 Quebec University libraries, and as of January 2021, place direct holds on those titles and have them delivered to you at McGill, depending on the COVID situation. So let's say you're searching for something, anything on constitutional law. Not necessarily a book or a journal article, you just want to see what's out there. You would type constitutional law in the search box and hit enter. Now, I'm not saying that this is the best search strategy for you when searching for constitutional law resources. Starting with the CAIJ's TOPO is much better, for instance, but it's a good way for me to show you generally how to use our catalog without focusing on a specific resource type. On the left-hand side, you'll see various filters. First, note that all editions and versions, print, electronic, audiobook, of a particular text are grouped together by default. If you are looking for a particular edition or version of a book, I recommend ungrouping. Next, you can see filters by library. By default, you are looking at McGill holdings. You can immediately expand to include BCI holdings, that is, holdings at the 17 other Quebec universities, to libraries worldwide, or you can narrow titles at a specific branch library. Note that when you narrow to branch library, you will necessarily exclude items only available in electronic format. Next, you can filter by format. You can look for articles, print or electronic books, theses, journal titles, etc. You can narrow by publication year, author, and language. I would caution you not to narrow by subject to law because that field is very unreliable and may cause you to lose relevant titles. Let's take a look at Constitutional Law by Patrick Monahan. Click on the title to see the full record. You can see the availability of this title at our library, as well as at partner Quebec libraries. In the future, once COVID passes, you will be able to place holds on books, which allows you to reserve a book that is either currently available or checked out, putting you in line for the book. As a result of our agreement with 17 Quebec partner libraries, there is no more recall option. That is, you cannot force a patron to bring back their borrowed book before the expiration of their 30-day loan. In normal times, we also have an article chapter scan service that allows you to request the scanning of an item within the limits of our copyback license. This option would be available to you from the record itself. If you were conducting research and found this text to be particularly useful, you might consider browsing the shelf virtually. By selecting this option, you are able to see not only the physical books housed on either side of this title in the library, but also the electronic books that would be located nearby if they were print versions. If this title was available electronically, you would have a View eBook button. If this book was not available at McGill, but was available at BCI or any other library, a Request Interlibrary Loan button would exist in the record. This allows you to have a book sent to you at no cost for pickup at the library. This service, however, will only resume and function with the lifting of COVID restrictions. As I mentioned during your orientation, you will not be able to borrow ebooks that are available at other institutions. If you see that McGill only has a print copy of something that another institution owns in electronic format, you can request curbside pickup for the print copy if you are in Montreal. Contact a librarian to see if we secretly own the electronic copy and it is just hidden in one of our databases, and we'll come back to this in our doctrinal research module. Or you can contact a librarian to request the purchase of the electronic copy, particularly if you're not in Montreal or are unable to borrow the print copy. And that's all for this lesson. Please see the associated assignment and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.